Welcome to the Orbounder 12-foot combo DVD video manual, model OR1213A. This DVD is intended to serve as a visual guide and to be used in conjunction with the user's manual. Before we begin, please retrieve your copy of the user's manual so you can follow along as we go. Be sure to read all safety instructions, safety placards, and warnings in the user's manual. In addition to the safety warnings and precautions, you will also find a brief guide to trampoline fitness and basic jumps, as well as games to enjoy with your new Orbounder. To begin, locate a suitable location for your trampoline. The area should be level and free from obstacles, both overhead and side to side. You should have a minimum overhead clearance of 24 feet from ground level. Be sure to put your trampoline away from overhead wires, tree limbs, and other possible hazards. Also, be sure to maintain a free space of 7 feet around your trampoline. Now it's time to begin. Chapter 2. Frame Assembly. First, you should become familiar with the various parts that make up your trampoline. You can refer to the parts listing page in your user's manual. When looking at parts listing, note the different types of parts and their quantities. Let's start with the leg assembly. This will require 2 J-legs and 1 leg center. These are key number 5 and key number 6 in your user's manual. Lay out the 2 leg sides and 1 leg center so that it makes a W shape. Join the 3 pieces so that the screw holes line up. With a Phillips head screwdriver, screw self-tapping screws into the screw holes. You have now completed 1 leg assembly. Repeat this step with the remaining 3 leg assemblies. Next, you will need to assemble the top rails. The easiest way to put the trampoline together is in 3 individual sections. Each section requires 1 each of key A, key B, and key C from your user's manual. Note that key C is a longer piece of top rail than both key A and B. Key A has a T-connector on one end, while key B has a socket support on the same end. To begin, first take key A, the top rail with 5 spring holes, and T-connector. Place it on the ground with the spring holes facing toward the ground. Next, place key B, the top rail with socket support, next to key A. Insert key A into the socket support of key B. Now take key C, the longer top rail with T-connector, and place it next to key B. The last step is to attach key C to the end of key B, like this. You now have assembled 1 section of top rails. Now, repeat this step with the other top rails, making a total of 4 top rail sections. Now, insert one end of the leg assemblies into the T-connector on one of your top rail sections. Please note that the other end of the leg assembly does not line up with the T-connector. Pull the free end of the leg assembly until it lines up with the T-connector. Once both sides are in, push down firmly on the leg assembly to ensure a tight fit. The tension of the leg assembly helps hold the pieces together. Repeat this step with the remaining 3 leg assemblies. Turn over 2 of the completed frame sections and join them together. Add another section to the first 2 sections. Repeat this with the last section to complete the frame. Chapter 3. Attaching the jumping surface. The next step is to attach the jumping surface to the frame using the springs. Note, you will have 60 5.5-inch springs that are silver. During the installation of springs, we recommend wearing gloves and protective eyewear. First, lay out the jumping surface inside the frame with all warning labels pointing up and the V-rings with yellow dotted stitching lined up near the T-connector of the frame. Note the little end of the spring attaches to the V-ring, and the big loop of the ring will attach to the top rail. Locate a V-ring with yellow dotted markings and attach a spring to the yellow dotted V-ring on the right side of the T-connector. Next, go to the other side of the trampoline and attach the exact opposite V-ring with yellow markings to the opposite T-connector, using the spring pulling tool. Be consistent on which side of the pod connector you attach the spring. Next, attach another yellow marked V-ring to the T-connector on one side with another spring. Again, be consistent on which side of the T-connector you attach the spring. Continue attaching the springs next to the T-connectors on opposite sides, going in a star pattern. By attaching the springs evenly, one at a time, on opposite sides, you distribute the pressure evenly across the jumping surface. This makes attaching the jumping surface much easier than attaching them in a clockwise fashion. Note, if you attach the springs in a clockwise fashion, when you reach the opposite side, it may appear that your jumping surface is too small. If this happens, remove the springs and start over. Now that you have all of the T-connector springs attached, repeat the process by attaching one silver spring next to each of the 4 socket supports, going in the same star-like pattern. Next, attach one silver spring halfway between the springs you have already attached, still following the star pattern. Continue adding springs in this star pattern until all V-rings have been attached to the frame. Chapter 4. Attaching the frame pad. Warning: do not use the trampoline without the frame pad, which is designed to reduce the likelihood of injury to the user from coming into contact with the trampoline frame. Lay out the frame pad on top of the trampoline with the straps facing down. Note that there are 2 kinds of straps. Some of the straps are near the frame, and some are near the jumping surface. The inner straps should be tied in a basic knot around the nearest V-ring. The outer D-ring strap goes around the top rail and is then secured using the D-ring on the other end of the strap. Repeat these steps with all of the straps. Your trampoline is now complete. Chapter 5. The enclosure poles. To begin the enclosure system, lay out a bottom straight pole and curved top pole with cap so that the screw holes line up. Screw in a self-tapping screw. Repeat to form the other 3 enclosure poles. Attaching the enclosure poles to the frame uses the following parts for each pole: 1 wedge, 2 U-bolts, 2 brackets, 1 for each U-bolt, and 4 self-locking nuts, 2 for each U-bolt. To begin the U-bolt assembly, first find 1 enclosure wedge and line the top of the wedge up to the bottom of the T-connector. Now rest 1 enclosure pole flush against the wedge and hold it in place so that the bottom of the enclosure pole is flush with the bottom of the wedge. It will be easier to assemble the enclosure poles if you have one person holding the frame pole in the correct position while a second person assembles the U-bolts into place. Remember, the enclosure pole should be oriented so that the top pole points inward towards the middle of the trampoline. Align the first U-bolt approximately 1/2 inch above the top of the wedge around the T-connector. Place the bracket onto the U-bolts and tighten the self-locking nuts. Align the second U-bolt approximately 1 inch above the bottom of the enclosure pole. Remember that the bottom of the enclosure pole needs to remain parallel with the bottom of the wedge. Place the bracket onto the U-bolts and tighten the self-locking nuts. Repeat for the remaining 3 enclosure poles. Be sure to align the poles with the corresponding right or left sides of the legs that the first pole was placed. For instance, if you began assembly on the right side T-connector of the trampoline leg, then on the next leg, assemble the enclosure pole also on the right side T-connector of the leg. Also, be sure that the curved top portion of the enclosure pole is pointed inwards, towards the center of the trampoline. Check all U-bolts again to ensure tightness. Chapter 6. The enclosure netting. First, you will need to assemble the 2 G3 fiberglass poles. Each pole consists of 6 pole segments. Lay out the enclosure netting and the 2 patented G3 fiberglass poles on the trampoline. Insert 1 pole into the opening of a sleeve on the netting. Make sure the pole stays inside the sleeve as it passes through the 2 openings. Repeat with the other pole on the opposite side. Connecting the poles requires 2 people. Each person needs to stand at opposite openings of the netting sleeves. Take the end of a pole in each hand. Slowly walk towards each other so that the poles begin to arch and take the shape of the trampoline. Join the 2 poles using the connector bracket at each end. Hang the netting on an enclosure pole by inserting the exposed portion of a fiberglass pole into the cap at the top of the enclosure pole. Continue by connecting the netting to the enclosure pole directly across from the first pole. Then attach the remaining poles. Chapter 7. Securing the netting. To secure the netting to jumping surface, you will need to lace the enclosure rope through the netting and the V-ring. Start at the V-ring under the doorway of the enclosure. Thread a length of enclosure rope through the V-ring. Tie a double knot on the V-ring to secure the rope to the jumping surface. Using the end of the rope with a cap, lace it through the bottom of the netting about halfway between 2 V-rings, and then through the next V-ring. Continue to lace the rope through the netting and V-rings in this fashion until you are near the end of the rope section. At the end, tie off the rope section to the V-ring with another double knot. Begin the next section of rope at this V-ring. Repeat this process for each section of rope, working your way in one direction to the opposite side of the trampoline across from the door. Then go back and finish in the other direction from the starting point. This will help evenly distribute the tension in the netting. Now you should verify that all of the parts have been securely attached. After you have completed this final inspection, your trampoline is fully complete. Congratulations! We're sure you'll enjoy every minute of fitness and play on your new 12-foot or bounder combo trampoline. Once again, be sure to read all the warning labels and the user's manual before using the trampoline. Remember, if you are missing any parts or have any questions, please contact our customer support staff Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Central Time. 1-877-927-8777.